Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Chiller Queen podcast. I'm your host, Avery Warner. And, on my podcast, talk about true crime, crazy conspiracies. Although I've been going a lot towards conspiracies lately, mixed in with a little bit true crime. If you've been watching my David Hamblin series, which is kind of both, that's a crazy case in and of itself. You can watch that full episode on my premium Rockfin channel, rockfin.com/Chiller Queen podcast. It is a bonus series. I did post a preview on my feed that you guys can watch. There's also some previews you can watch on YouTube as well. So if you're interested in that, go check it out. Today, by the way, you guys are looking beautiful today. I'm feeling good myself. I'm doing sober October, you know what I mean? And you never really, I'm at an age right now, I'm 36 years old, and you really realize like how important it is for sleep and living a healthy lifestyle. You can't really like grow as a person on an unhealthy foundation. Am I right? And I'm starting to realize that my mind, my brain, and all that kind of stuff is going down the shitter. And so I'm doing my best. I'm doing my best to change some of the habits that I've been doing. And so, sometimes you just get into these cycles of just things you do to cope with life and escape. And, life is just sometimes really hard. And so I just got to say, I'm feeling good. And it's been kind of tough, because sometimes I like to wind down with a glass of wine at night or smoke a little bit of, cannabis. And then I always make these excuses that it helps me concentrate. But then I realize, and then also that affects your sleep, right? So when you're not getting good sleep, just the rest of your life just kind of falls apart. So I realized that stuff is important. So it's always nice to take these little breaks of not putting anything in your system, and then you realize like, oh, there's my brain. Okay, now I have the energy and the focus, and I'm feeling good. So that's where I'm at. So unfortunately, though today's going to be a controversial episode. Okay. I did a poll on my Instagram. If you're not following me on Instagram, Chiller Queen Podcast, I would suggest doing that if you want to participate in any of these discussions that I have where, I like to ask you guys sometimes what you want to hear. You guys can also talk to me on there. I'm not very good at responding because I am pretty overwhelmed by all of the platforms that I'm on. I think I have collectively across all my platforms around 300,000 followers. And to try and keep up with the amount of messages and the amount of inquiries that I get can be very overwhelming, especially with all the things that I'm juggling. I'm also a single mom and all that kind of stuff. So please don't take it personal, but I really do. It can take me a while. And honestly, sometimes the best way to reach out to me is through email, because I'll check my email because I don't feel as overwhelmed by that, but hopefully that doesn't start happening. So I did a poll on my Instagram story asking you guys if you wanted my perception on the Tim Ballard story, because, and I was kind of on the fence with this because it's a very touchy subject. There's a lot of people who have a very, what's the word I'm thinking of? They have a really strong opinion on this situation. Either they're for Tim Ballard or they're against Tim Ballard. And it's just like Trump, right? If you're for Trump, it's pretty much a love-hate relationship. You either love him or you hate him. And if you like Trump, then and other people don't like Trump, they're going to put all these labels on you and call you X, Y, and Z. And the reverse is the same as well. And I've just been waking up to this reality that people are so politically driven nowadays that they're having a hard time hearing the truth in some ways. If it goes against their internal biases. and then they get cognitive dissonance, and then they just hop on board with all the other people who are spewing stuff out that supports their cognitive dissonance. You know what I mean? And so I started stepping back from that because I just, you know, I think everything's getting all muddied, and it's like if somebody comes out against somebody that they like the things that they're saying online, like let's say they're a public figure, the Russell Brand situation, okay? Russell Brand has been coming out talking a lot about he's been a big voice in the conservative atmosphere. Like he talks about corruption and all these things, and so he has gained a lot of followers that like what he says, they agree with what he says, and he's been pretty open and honest about his history and how he, used to be hypersexual and that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden he has these allegations coming out when he's built this very large platform that kind of goes against the government. And so people who listen to that and believe in it and agree with it, they're going to try and support that person because they don't want to believe that this person that is saying all the right things and doing all the right things in their mind are participating in these evil acts. Okay. And that's the thing with Tim Ballard. And I'm not saying that it's true or not. Okay. But with Tim Ballard, it, because he's in the field of sex trafficking, okay, QAnon has really created this political division around sex trafficking, human trafficking, which is actually kind of sad. In a way, it woke up a lot of people to the reality of human trafficking. And in a way, it raised a lot of awareness. It brought a lot of money towards these organizations that were kind of fighting for donations, and Operation Underground being one of them. Operation Underground went from, an organization that was only taking in hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to now what I think it was like 41 million in 2021. I mean, that's like a lot of operations. That's a lot of money to put towards victims and children who have been victimized by sex trafficking, right? That is a lot of money. And so when you're an organization that brings in that amount of money, you also gain some sort of status, right? You become more in the public eye. You have more people in the public paying attention to you and the actions that you're doing because obviously, in order to gain that much money, you have to be doing something pretty prominent in the public eye, okay? And Tim Ballard he was a beloved, or he is a beloved member of the Mormon church. Maybe not now. We'll talk about that in a second. Um, but he's gained a lot of attention, especially with the movie coming out, Sound of Freedom, that has gained a lot of international attention. And then you had the media coming out criticizing Tim Ballard and the Sound of Freedom. And some people looked at that as like, he was exaggerating human trafficking. Other people were like, well, if you're going to go against that, then you're a pedophile and you're just part of this human trafficking ring and all this kind of stuff, right? We already have distrust with the media. So if the media comes out against the Sound of Freedom, then already that's just justification that we can't trust the media, in some people's minds. And so there's just been a lot of division. Human trafficking has been highly politicized, unfortunately, because the reality is human trafficking is real. It does happen. And we do need organizations like Operation Underground Railroad to go and help these victims, save children. But the reality is that we don't necessarily know the reality or the extent of human trafficking. There has been various different statistics that have come out that make it really hard to understand the truth behind some of these statistics, because the issue is that you have so many different things that fall under the category of human trafficking, which is like organ harvesting, uh, labor, sex trafficking, not just children. When we say human trafficking, we're not just talking about underage children being sex trafficked for sex slavery, who are being kidnapped and held against their will, uh, all over the place, right? And unfortunately, that's kind of because of all of the narrative that's been being pumped out there. That's where a lot of people's minds go when we talk about human trafficking. And so Operation Underground Railroad specifically, they do these operations across seas. They go in and they set up these jumps, and they try to find children and then infiltrate them with these Navy SEALs that come in, take down the bad guys, rescue the children, and then what happens to the children after that, we don't know. But what I'm going to say about this is, if you're part of the group that did not want me to talk about this, don't listen. I don't want this to bother you. I'm not here to step on anyone's toes or make anybody heated or any of that kind of stuff. These are genuine questions that I have, because when I do my research, and this is really important, if you are just listening to one narrative of the story and you refuse to listen to anything that goes against your own internal biases, then you are just a sheep. You are. Um, you do not have critical thinking skills. It is important to be open to various different narratives and seeing various different forms of evidence that go against your own internal biases, whatever you believe, and not to be judgmental, but to hear those things out and to critically think about them. And that way you can get a well-rounded understanding of the situation to make your own decisions on what's going on. And what I'll say is that all these right now, with what's going on with Tim Ballard, are all allegations. Nothing has been necessarily proven at this point. So everyone is around here with their own opinions, their own speculation, and what we're trying to understand with these new allegations coming out. And I think it's really important, because when you're talking about an organization that combats human trafficking and you have someone who's participating, who's the founder, who potentially is participating in actual abuse on people, when this person's supposed to be the protector of children coming out of abuse, who is participating allegedly in sexual misconduct, spiritual manipulation, grooming, all the allegations that are out there, which this stuff is not just reasonable things that humans, because every single nonprofit organization is going to have flaws. Okay, we're human. We make mistakes, and there's sometimes going to be these business practices where we don't align with all the rules, the laws, the regulations. Are those reasonable human flaws? Or is this unethical and legal issues that we have to really think about? Because there's people out there who say, I don't care if Tim Ballard did any of these heinous things. If he's saved one child, then that makes it okay. And if that's how you feel, okay, that's how you feel. I can't change that for you. In my own mind, though, ethically, I think it comes down to ethics, and these are things that donors should know before they're donating to an organization. Um, where their money is going, how it's being utilized, uh, as well as, you know, are these reasonable things that, we can look past, so that children continue to be rescued? Or is this person committing or even contributing to the acts that he's fighting against. Because in my mind, I think that that's, there's so many other organizations that are working to combat human trafficking, sex trafficking. They work with victims. There's a lot of other ethical organizations that aren't out there campaigning themselves, trying to get into the public eye. And there's a lot of concerns that I have just with how he has tried so hard to become such a public figure, making movies about himself and concerned about the production of these operations with cameras and videos and getting him in the video rescuing these children. It just seems very egotistical, and I have concerns about that kind of stuff. These are just thoughts that go through my head. Uh but we would want to know that as a donor, right? And so, what I'm going to be doing in this episode is just me talking out some of my concerns. I'm not for or against Tim Ballard. Okay. I like to, any type of allegations that are out there, I just listen to them and try to dissect them, try to find validation for some of them. Um, and that way I can kind of, think about how I feel about the situation. I have raised a lot of money in the past when my platform was when I gained a lot of traction coming off of television. I used my platform to raise awareness against human trafficking. And I also raised around $12,000 with my own t-shirt campaign. I mean, I put a lot of money into creating a logo and getting these shirts and all this kind of stuff, and the photography that was done just to promote and raise funds for Operation Underground Railroad. So to say that, I'm just against human trafficking or that I'm a pedophile and all this other stuff, which a lot of people, if you speak out against this whatsoever, this has happened to me online. I said something, I questioned something on a comment on, one of these things about human trafficking. And I got about 400 comments of people telling me that I was a pedophile and that I deserve to burn in hell for the rest of my life. They wished that I, got the worst pain from hell burning in the fire, that I should get my children taken away from me. They accused me of being a human trafficker, and that I am a participant in, you know, abusing children and all this kind of stuff. And I am so far from that. It's not even funny. Okay. I am actually a victim myself of child abuse, child sexual abuse, and the things that I have had to deal with in my own life. It lingers with you your entire life. You can't really just, take it back. Um, and it's things you have to work through mentally. And so when I question, I mean, just being accused of that kind of stuff, if you're someone who listens to this and by the end of this, you're gonna call me a pedophile, like bye-bye. Like you have absolutely no critical thinking skills whatsoever. You are I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna play into it. Just don't go calling me a pedophile, okay? If you don't like this episode, that's fine. I think we can all agree to disagree on certain things, but this is me just having a conversation. So, let's talk about the recent allegations. Um, there are a couple of things that so obviously 7 women have come forth talking about how they were spiritually manipulated. There was sexual harassment claims coming from Operation Underground Railroad. There are sexual abuse allegations that these women endured. There's grooming. These are some of the claims coming from these 7 women who happen to be operatives that worked with Operation Underground Railroad on something called the couple's ruse, which Tim Ballard will explain to you what that is. Uh, and then there's also, there like a lot of people think that this is a political stunt because Tim Ballard just recently came out talking about how he might be running for senator of Utah to replace Mitt Romney. And so, it's just divine or perfect timing that these allegations would come forth to, kind of, it's a political stunt apparently. But as we will uncover, these allegations there's been an internal investigation going on for a while with Operation Underground Railroad, and that these allegations weren't just filed recently. These have been this has been something that's been going on since earlier this year. And that it just so happens that now the ball is getting going after an internal investigation, because that is what helped open the door for these victims to start seeking justice. Because a lot of people think that Tim Ballard is still the founder of Operation Underground Railroad. He is not. He's not actually a part of Operation Underground Railroad anymore, because of there's been sexual harassment allegations, and there's been an internal investigation with Operation Underground Railroad, the employees, and they were the ones who basically pushed Tim Ballard out because of all of these allegations coming out. And that's been going on for a while. People have been researching into Tim Ballard for years. And so this stuff is not new. If you look into Operation Underground Railroad, it's just that these allegations now are becoming public, and now there's charges, being filed against him. And there's also this, they're talking about the Mormon Church denounces Tim Ballard, which is a big deal, because Tim Ballard is a beloved member of the Mormon Church, and they've supported Operation Underground Railroad. So if that is true, then Tim Ballard is out there in the public eye. He's talking a lot on his Instagram account. He's also out there in public talking in front of groups and claiming that he is in good standing with the Mormon Church and that he has not been excommunicated. So the interesting part about this, the only reason why I'm bringing it up, we cannot find specific evidence at this point that he has been excommunicated. There's just been this Vice article coming out, and then there's been a lot of people who've been trying to find out if he has. But the reason why I'm paying attention to it is because if he is out there claiming that he is in good standing with the church, that he has not been excommunicated, then it will be very interesting if we find out that he has, and that he's been lying to the public about that, because that's skeptical behavior. And then there's also a article that came out talking about one of the producers, or one of the operatives, Paul Hutchinson, had gone on one of the jumps with Tim Ballard, and that he had groped the boobs of an underage trafficking victim on one of the jumps. And we're going to hear from Jimmy Rex, who was actually there on that jump, and he was one of the operatives as well. He's going to talk about his perception of what happened there, because he did come out saying that that was true, but that this woman was not underage, which is just kind of odd. But we'll hear from Jimmy Rex. And so there's also this picture that's going around of Tim in his underwear with these fake tattoos. I'll show you that. This picture right here, if you're watching on YouTube or Rockfin, he's kind of in these skimpy, I guess they're not skimpy. They're just really short undies. And then he's also got these fake tattoos that are tattooed on him in various spots. He's got one on his upper chest. He's got one on his upper arm on the left and the right side. And then he has one right above his penis, in his lower chest or lower stomach area, very low. And then he also has this like heart, this like heart tattoo on his right leg, right underneath his underwear. And we're going to talk about that today, if it's legit, because apparently Tim Ballard was sending this photo to some of the alleged victims. It's kind of like a, sexy little photo. But some other people think that it's not true, or that it's not real, that it's been photoshopped. And Tim Ballard has actually come out confirming that the photo is real. So we'll see what he has to say about that as well. And then we're also going to hear from Tim Ballard and his wife about what they talk about with the couple's ruse. And there's some breaking news from Fox News about some documentation into OUR that has just come out. This was like the investigation, the internal investigation that was done. So Fox News in Utah has been covering this pretty extensively. They've been doing a pretty good job. And then Eric Moutsos, we're going to talk or hear a video from him. Eric Moutsos is one of Tim Ballard's close friends. Maybe not so much anymore, but he's a previous police officer. He has worked closely with Tim Ballard. He was a really good friend of Tim Ballard, and he's been on these jumps. He was an operative, and he was actually a supporter of Tim Ballard when these allegations came out. And then he started changing his tone, and we'll figure out why that is as we go along here. So, okay, first thing, let's just talk about this photo here. Let's just take a look at that real quick, okay? Tim Ballard is basically, in his little underwear. He's laying back on a couch, and he's got nothing on but this underwear, okay? And he has tattoos. I told you where all the tattoos were. Apparently, these tattoos are henna tattoos, and he gets them put on there to kind of make him look like a bad guy when he goes, because apparently tattoos kind of make you look like you would traffic children or something like that. And so he gets these tattoos, and then he goes overseas, and it's just like it's a character thing is what he says. And he has this woman that he has hired who does these henna tattoos, and she apparently was putting these henna tattoos. We'll hear from her as well. I think I have that video. I put together all my videos. I sometimes I don't remember what video I got in there, but he does confirm that these are real. The one question that I have is that if you have these tattoos in the places that you have them, why do you have them there? Because if you're not taking off your clothes and participating in any of these acts with the children, how are the traffickers going to see a tattoo right above your penis? A lot of these tattoos are placed in areas that would go underneath your clothes. So if he was wearing clothes, I would never see these tattoos. Maybe a little bit on his he has them kind of on his upper arms. Maybe I would see those if he was wearing a tank top or something like that. Maybe the one on his chest. But I would think like if I wanted to look like badass, or like I do bad things, maybe I would get some like crazy neck tattoos or, on my forehead or, maybe my full arm I would get done or something like that. But he has like a heart tattoo. I mean, that doesn't look crazy. I mean, a heart tattoo, you know? Uh, wouldn't you want to get like a Satan tattoo or something like that? I don't know. And then just some weird tribal stuff on there. Um, and I don't know what the one above his penis says, but it says something. And just like, if you're not in a situation, especially if you're using the couple's ruse, right? If you're using the couple's ruse, which is allegedly supposed to prevent you from having to partake in some of the sexual acts with the children, you could say, oh, my wife is there. And you're not taking off your clothes at all. I'm just kind of curious as why you would need then all these tattoos in areas that these traffickers would never see. So that is just my perspective on this photo here. And then so, just to give you guys kind of an understanding, these victims allege that they were the women who would go on these operations and would use the tactic that he calls the couple's ruse. He would go on these jumps in different countries and he would interact with like these really, really dangerous men. And the way these dangerous people would test his legitimacy was by asking him to do something sexual with the girls, being trafficked. And in order to avoid this, he created something called the couple's ruse. And now some of the women basically who went on the couple's ruse are reporting, that he made them sleep with him in the same bed and shower together and have sexual engagements with some of them and groom them and use like spiritual manipulation and stuff like that. So let's just go through with it. I'm going to first show you guys a press conference. Some of these videos are long, so bear with me, but they have a lot of intricate details in them that make me kind of, that have made me kind of question some things. And I just want to talk about them out loud. And, if you guys have anything to show me that you want to chime in on, or you want to get involved in the conversation at all, you can always reach out to me on my Instagram account. You can reach out to me on my email, chillerqueenpodcast@gmail.com. I would love to hear your guys's information. I'm open. Okay. I'm always open to information. But these are just things that I have questions about. So we're going to go to the press conference here and see. This is the Utah attorney that is representing the victims of Tim Ballard. And we're going to see what she has to say. I did a little bit of chopping up, so I pre-recorded these and I chopped up some of the stuff. If you guys are wondering, there were some things that were just really redundant where she was like, I can't comment on that. I can't comment on that. So I just chose some of the things that I thought were really important. So let's take a listen to what she has to say. This is a press conference that was just held recently.
Good morning. My name is Suzette Rasmussen, and I represent a group of women who wish to speak out regarding the recent allegations related to Tim Ballard, the former CEO of Operation Underground Railroad. I've been asked to read a statement on their behalf. As former employees and contractors who worked closely with Operation Underground Railroad, we are choosing to give a public statement about our experiences with Tim Ballard.
I'm just going to say something really quick. These are previous operatives that have worked with Tim Ballard. These aren't just random people off the street making these allegations. I want people to put their mindset in a if this is just random people making these allegations, I could see how the credibility would be maybe a little bit less. But these are actual employees that are coming out against Tim Ballard. These are people that have worked with him on these jumps, that have dedicated their own, or that have put themselves at risk, in danger, to go across seas on these operations to rescue children for a greater cause that they thought that they were participating in. And then allegedly didn't have the experience that they thought they were going to have, and actually became victims themselves and are now speaking out about it. So, besides the 7 women making allegations, there's also other operatives that have witnessed things that they're concerned about that are speaking out. And then there's also former employees that have been speaking out for years about their experience with Operation Underground Railroad. So we have to put our minds in a place where this isn't just random people coming out and saying something. These are actual people who have worked closely with Tim Ballard and who have dedicated their own livelihood. That's probably the wrong word, but they have participated in something, a great cause that's higher than themselves, that are now coming out and talking about their experience. And another thing that I just want to point out too, is that, with these women, think about it in this way. Them coming out against someone as powerful as Tim Ballard and a public figure who was a very prominent figure in the Mormon church and excuse me. He's a very prominent figure in Utah in the Mormon church. He was very beloved. And he's now just even recently in the last couple of years has gained a lot of notoriety, especially with the movie Sound of Freedom coming out, which is based around him and his story. For them to come out against someone like that, you have to expect that there's going to be a lot of backlash and scrutiny. Like you're going to be putting yourself, your family, and your life in danger of that, and so these women have children. They're married, and to think that just even having one person come out and be like, you know what, I don't like Tim Ballard, and I don't like the experience that I had, so I'm going to come out and just make up an allegation that I was sexually that there was sexual misconduct and that I was groomed, spiritual, all that kind of stuff, right? They have to sit there and also be okay with inviting that type of backlash into their life, to getting a lawyer to fight this in court against a public figure. They're inviting danger into their life. They're inviting, if these women were in a good relationship with their husband, it's alleged that he's destroyed families. Do you think that these victims are doing that because they don't like Tim Ballard, or that they're being paid off in order to make these allegations? Not only that, it's not just one person coming forth. That person would have to find 6 other people who've had exactly the same experience and who wants to invite that type of scrutiny and danger into the lives of them, their children, and their family. And to go through the process of the legal courts and all of that kind of stuff. Put yourself in that mindset. This isn't just an easy, like, I'm just going to go out there and say that he abused me. There's so many working parts that happen. And especially when you're a public figure, you invite a lot of backlash and danger and all that kind of stuff into the lives of not just you, but your children and your husband and your family. And for somebody to just be lying about that and like wanting to invite that into their lives, I think would be very rare. Not saying that it doesn't happen. It definitely has happened. But to also find other operatives that have worked with Tim Ballard and have been on this couple's ruse and have experienced the exact same thing as them and want to also lie and invite all of that scrutiny and danger into the lives of their family. I think the odds of that happening aren't very likely. And so, just think about that too. But let's continue here.
Earlier this year, complaints were filed that opened the door for an internal investigation. We now stand together to affirm the truth behind these allegations. Our involvement with Operation Underground Railroad was rooted in our commitment to fighting against human trafficking. But while engaging in that noble cause, we were subjected to sexual harassment, spiritual manipulation, grooming, and sexual misconduct.
Can you imagine wanting to participate in helping children of sex trafficking, saving children of abuse, and then ending up becoming a victim yourself? That's wild.
We value our privacy as we work to rebuild our lives. We also feel a responsibility to speak out and state unequivocally that these allegations are true. We acknowledge the risks involved in challenging someone as prominent as Tim Ballard. We will reveal our stories in our own time and in our own way and on our own terms. But for now, we choose to remain anonymous. We wish to express our gratitude for the outpouring of support from those who have responded and commented to the media and social media posts. We also want to extend our support and solidarity to all survivors of harassment and abuse of any kind. We believe you, and we are standing by your side as you embark on your own healing journey. For anyone else who may wish to come forward, you can reach out to me via email at ourinfo@allutahlaw.com. Thank you.
Suzanne, how many women?
At this point, I can just state that the women feel very strongly that the fight against human trafficking is a noble endeavor and one that these women were eager to engage in. But the behavior of Tim Ballard crossed the line, and these women cannot remain silent. I can say that complaints have been filed and statements were known for several months.
So that's another part that I just wanted to make a point on that I was talking about earlier, is that these allegations didn't just come out, that they have been known for a while and that they have been filed for a while, and it's just now coming to the surface.
Affirmations that the women make are the truth of their experiences, and their experiences were that they experienced sexual harassment, spiritual manipulation, grooming, and sexual misconduct. The only thing I can say at this time, and more details may come forward as they express that they would like to share their story in their own time and on their own terms, but at this point, they are working to rebuild their lives. These are real women whose lives were affected through their marriages, through their families, and they're working to rebuild from here and heal.
Okay. So, get this up here. I mean, so basically what she's saying is that the victims are alleging, sexual misconduct, spiritual manipulation, grooming, and sexual harassment. And, she mentioned that these women are trying to put their life back together within their family. Pay attention to that, because it hasn't really come out that this has destroyed, like, apparently the allegations are pretty mediocre right now, but as time goes on, the real allegations and their stories and what happened to them is going to start coming out more and more. So right now we don't have the full story, but apparently he has destroyed families. He's done some pretty heinous things that we might, be hearing more as the story unfolds. Okay. Now, I just want to make a point that the allegations of sexual harassment, have been going on for years, but the victims have just been afraid to speak up because of how much power Tim Ballard has. These women live in Utah. I know I keep saying that, but like, some people just don't understand that it's not just easy to come out and make these allegations. Put yourself, like, think about what it would be like for you to just come out against a public figure and what you would be inviting into your life, Okay, now I want to share a video that Tim Ballard made on his Instagram account. You can find him at Tim Ballard 89. And this is where he is describing the couple's ruse.
I want to tell you about a very important undercover tactic that we use that involves female operators. Based on the allegations that are flying around and the questions being asked, we've decided to tell you these tactics. While I do so, I'm going to pay homage, respect, love, and gratitude for these female operators who serve such an important role in rescue operations. You need to understand that children don't just fall out of the sky. They don't fall into your desk. It's a very proactive work. So if I'm a man or one of my operators approached by a trafficker trying to put a child to service on that person, or a sex worker, and that man, that operator doesn't partake of what's being offered, they lose credibility. And so we came up with a concept that we call the couple's ruse or the couple's tactic, where you go in together pretending to be a husband or a wife or boyfriend, girlfriend. Now you go in and one of you could pretend that, yes, I want to partake in this sex act with this woman or this child, but I can't because my girlfriend won't let me, but maybe we can do it later. So is that cool? Like, let's keep talking and she'll warm up to it eventually. But the bottom line is we block for each other. So the trafficker sees the situation, recognizes that I have every excuse not to partake. Hundreds, maybe thousands of children have been rescued using this amazing tactic. As I've had these talks over the last several weeks with these amazing, heroic female operators, they want their voices heard. They want you to know what it's been like for them working with me and other operators. You, the supporters, it's time for you to look under the hood. And you can make your own decision about these tactics. But I want to pay homage to these female operators. I want to give them their opportunity to tell their story and bear their witness to the amazing work that they have done working with our teams. So please, over the next several days, listen to their testimonies, listen to the work they've done, and thank God for them for rescuing these children.
Okay. So a couple of things that I just want to these are some of the questions that I have with the couple's ruse, because Paul Hutchinson has come out, he was the one who has gone on these jumps with Tim Ballard and has participated in a lot of the stuff with Tim Ballard. He has come out talking about how the couple's ruse is actually the least effective tactic in rescuing children out of all all the things that they do, and Tim Ballard has continuously wanted to participate in the couple's ruse, but that it is the least effective tactic and has actually gotten in between the ability of saving children. And another interesting, and this is just where my mind goes, and maybe I don't have enough understanding of how these operations go down, but I find it very odd that, if I was a human trafficker and somebody was, came up to me trying to buy children, and yet there's a wife there who doesn't want to participate in this act, like, why are they there? It's odd to me that they would bring someone who wouldn't want to participate in the human trafficking ordeal, and yet they're sitting there trying to find children and participate in things with them, when why would the wife be there then, and him trying to find sex trafficked victims? So that's another thing that's just kind of odd to me, that whole situation would happen, and it be like, to me that would be kind of a red flag. But basically, I think one of the biggest things, he's explaining what the couple's ruse is, but the allegations of these victims, these are some of the concerns that I have, is that it's not necessarily what happens in these situations with the traffickers, it's what happens in these private sleeping quarters between them and Tim and these female operators, because they allege that, away from these traffickers. So it's not even, if they're coming and intersecting so that Tim doesn't have to participate in any sexual acts with these children, then why would they have to sleep with him? Why would they have to shower with him? Why would they have to participate in some of these sexual acts that they're alleging? And so these aren't necessarily about the couple's ruse tactic, but they're kind of claiming that the couple's ruse is a front for grooming these attractive women. Some of them are very attractive, and grooming them into participating in these sex acts with him, and that, using spiritual manipulation and stuff like that. But, basically, the way that these worked, and Tim Ballard, it's one thing when you have, like, let's say an investigative team who goes in and finds intel that something like this is going on, and then they collect evidence and they find evidence that yes, it is going on, and then they set up some sort of operation in order to go in and infiltrate and rescue these children and take down the traffickers. That is a thing that I can see happening, finding evidence that this is going on and then going in and taking down the traffickers. But Tim Ballard doesn't operate that way. And what I think a lot of people don't know is that, allegedly he was paying this psychic over 6 figures a year as his intel, and which is already kind of weird and goes against the moral or Mormon belief system, right? Dealing with divination. And apparently she would channel the prophet Nephi in order to find these locations of where these children are. And then he would go in and basically go into these seedy areas of town that were really poor, in these really poor villages or neighborhood or areas, and he would flash money around and ask people, will you bring me children? And that's how he would try to find where these children are and try and find these traffickers. And that's like a big criticism, that's one of the biggest criticisms against Operation Underground Railroad is, are they creating the demand? And this is something I didn't really think about before, but now hearing about how they conduct their operations, it is kind of a concern for me. And Jimmy Rex, who has got on these operations, we'll hear from him later in a video about his experience with that. But when you go to a really poor area and you're a white American with a lot of money and you're flashing a lot of money around, these people may just go and find children to traffic in order to make money. And so it potentially some of these children weren't even trafficked until Tim Ballard and his operation team came forth and started flashing money around and creating the demand. So that's one of the biggest criticisms to the way that Operation Underground conducts its operations. So, that's just one thing. So the next video that I'm going to show is a video of Tim speaking out for his wife. And let's see what he has to say.
You from my wife, who is one of the most inspired people I know. She asked me to make this message, and I agree with her. Look, we are under attack. The work to rescue children who are being abused in the worst way around the world is under attack by all sorts of falsehoods, false accusations, and everything else that comes when you're fighting against evil. And she wants me to remind you something that we've said, and we say it again. I am faithful to my wife and to my God. And that is the truth. You can believe whatever you want, but I'm telling you that that is the truth. So let's get past that for now, and let's try something different. Let's just go out and do good. I don't care what that good is. Serve somebody. Find something good to do with your time. Productive. Help. Serve. Service turns the lights on. Service heals. And so I have dedicated to do that. My wife is dedicated to do that. And we invite you to do the same. Let's just serve all of God's children, because when you are in the service of your fellow men, you are in fact in the service of your God.
So some people have talked about how, like, why is he talking for his wife? But Catherine has actually come out, and I'm not doxing her by saying her name, because she's been very vocal coming out in support of her husband. She's gone on a lot of podcasts talking about it. So it's, not him speaking out for his wife, but, But some of the things that people have also said is that he doesn't look well, that he has been slurring his words in a lot of the videos, and that there might be some sort of like substance abuse issue. And I can't really comment on that because, there's some videos where he looks pretty flushed, like his face looks kind of red, and that's a symptom of alcohol use. But again, those are just speculations. Those are just what people have observed, and I can't necessarily speak on that. I know he does a lot of crossfitting, and like that's all just speculation. But on a side note, there was one reporter who mentioned that the sexual engagements that he had with his fake wives were potentially Abrahamic tests, that he would put them in through his office and in his car. And, if you don't know what the Abrahamic test is, it's like similar to the Tim Jones story. Tim Jones was a cult leader. He was the one who basically made all these people drink the poisonous Kool-Aid. And then you had like this mass suicide that happened. And prior to that, Tim Jones would actually test his followers. He would test their commitment by making them drink Kool-Aid that he told them was poisonous when in fact it was not poisonous, just to test their commitment to him. And it was kind of the same with the Joseph Smith story. There was allegations that Joseph Smith had gone to some people and asked them to give up their wives to be a part of a polygamous marriage with Joseph Smith, and that if they didn't, God would destroy them. And then when the people were like, oh, there was one that cried, and it affected their life greatly. And right when, they actually came to the conclusion that, yes, I will give you my wife, Joseph Smith would say, oh, just kidding. I just wanted to test your devotion to your God. And then he would basically seal them right on the spot together. But that's basically like the Abrahamic test. So, when when the women were reporting like spiritual manipulation, this very well could be a possibility as to what they mean, is that he would use these spiritual manipulations like the Abrahamic test in order to kind of ask them, like, how far would you go to save children? What would you do to save children? And some of the sources had actually told this reporter that as part of these Abrahamic tests, Tim Ballard would tell them, how far you would go with children, and how far you're willing to go. And he would tell them that he had gotten Mormon apostle M. Russell Ballard's approval to use these kind of tactics for training. So maybe, this is another form of spiritual manipulation. I don't know. I don't know if there's any truth to that, because that's just allegations and what reporters and sources have said coming out. But again, that is speculation. We will just wait and see how this unfolds. So this next video that I want to show is Tim Ballard putting on it's basically one of his women operatives. He puts her forward, who's actually been a part of the couple's ruse. And she comes out with her experience being on the couple's ruse. So let's just hear what she has to say.
My name is Natalia, and I have been an undercover operator with OUR for over a year. I worked on various missions with Tim Ballard specifically, ranging from different countries, different continents. And during my time working with Tim, there has been zero inappropriate behavior, any sexual contact, any inappropriate sexual contact whatsoever before, during, or after a mission. Everything was kept very respectful, very professional. In fact, I think the OUR team went above and beyond to make sure the safety of both the operators and the victims and anybody involved in a mission. During my time in our different missions, we had to deploy different tactics depending on the scenarios, one of which was the couple's ruse, which involved us posing as a couple During those missions specifically, there was, again, absolutely zero sexual contact, touching, anything inappropriate of that nature. Everything was very much professional and respectful through and through from start to finish.
All right. Well, so, I mean, that's not bad feedback. I think that's important feedback. That's not worthless at all. Because she's basically giving her own experience of being an operative, participating in the couples ruse with Tim Ballard, and how everything was done professionally. There was no touching or any of that kind of stuff. But I think the problem is that this is just one of the women. Okay. I mean, that doesn't mean that there are not other women who did experience something inappropriate. This is, again, similar to a Joseph Smith story. There's, because apparently Joseph Smith allegedly had all of these wives, which, I've talked about in my David Hamblin series, that's a conspiracy within the Mormon church, that maybe he actually never had these polygamist wives, and that was just created by this bad group that's operating within the Mormon church, that spread those rumors. But according to the majority of what people believe, Joseph Smith had a lot of wives. He just didn't have sex with all of them, and he didn't have children with them. And so some people, wonder, like, why was that? Are they ugly, or are they too old, or, whatever it is. But just because some people experience some things and others didn't, does not mean that it absolutely did not happen. But, it's great that she's coming out and speaking about her experience with Tim Ballard, because I think that's important to note. So this next one, this is the Jimmy Rex video, and this one's a longer video, but he has a lot of really great intel and information about his experience, because he has reportedly gone on some of these jumps with Tim Ballard, and was there and watched the Paul Hutchinson situation directly. The guy who allegedly groped the boob of this underage trafficked victim, and has personally talked to some of these women firsthand, and has heard some of the women's allegations. So let's just see what he has to say.
Like, why I have this insider information, I just know all the characters in the story, and I've talked to them personally since all this has been going down. And the thing that made me mad about Tim recently is I feel like I'm kind of duped. I feel like I got duped. I feel like I never thought Tim would do the things that have come out and the things that haven't come out yet that are going to come out. I'll just cut through the suspense for you. It's a lot worse than the article said. Tim wasn't just sleeping in the same bed and showering with these women. He was full on having affairs. I know the names of multiple people that he had the affairs with, broke up families, and that's going to come out. And the thing that I can't figure out is he knows this is going to come out. Like, he knows these stories are going to break. He knows that he's dead in the water. The church does not throw people under the bus, by the way. The church is smart. If you think of the church as like an organization with self-preservation, it's a lot easier to understand a lot of the things that they do. Tim did have a very close relationship with M. Russell Ballard, very obvious. They have pictures of them traveling and doing other things. He also was a silent partner, according to Tim, in this whole thing that he was trying to do, the whiteboard video and all that stuff. Everybody's seen that. There's a silent partner was one of these, and Paul should probably just come out and talk about this stuff, but he's talked about it on the record before. And long story short, at that meeting, Tim had mentioned that his silent partner was M. Russell Ballard. The church is smart enough to know this. They don't want, once they found out that Tim was having affairs and he was using M. Russell Ballard's name, saying that he basically okayed it.
So that was kind of like what I just said about Tim Ballard using M. Russell Wilson, saying that he okayed this type of sexual misconduct on these victims as like a spiritual manipulation to get them to do these things with him.
fool these women that were volunteering for OUR. And that's why he was essentially betrayed so badly. That's why the church publicly made sure that everybody knew that the church didn't endorse Tim or OUR, because it's that bad. The church never does that. They've never done that for somebody that was an active member, unless they needed to get ahead of the story. And so when you think about that way, it's not the church's fault. I was duped by Tim too. We wanted to rescue children. That's what the mission was. That's what everything was supposed to be about. Yet over and over, I saw firsthand Tim's ego and Paul's ego, if I'm being honest. And he's one of my close friends. And so, I'm going to be honest here about a couple things though, but him and Tim, their egos absolutely destroyed at that time what was going on with OUR. And I'll explain. So long story short, you saw the Vice article this week about the psychic. You saw the Vice article about when Paul touched the breast of an underage girl, which, by the way, she's not underage. She was proven to be over 18. That part of the story didn't come out till later for whatever reason, so that they could add on to the article instead of saying it up front, because I think it does matter a lot. I was there. I was 10 feet away when it happened. And I'll say this. I'm not going to say too much about that because that's Paul's story to tell. But at the end of the day, 3 things crossed my mind when that happened. And by the way, you have to understand that there was bad guys undercover and there was evil dudes. These were the most evil dudes we'd ever arrested, we'd ever worked with, we'd ever met. That particular op, we were dealing with 3 different groups of traffickers. It was in Cabo and it was right downtown. If you've ever been to Cabo, it's not that big of a downtown. And 2 of the traffickers, when they heard we were dealing with this other trafficker, by the way, I hate that the story like publicly says where we were. That puts our lives, I feel like, a little bit in danger, because I don't know. We got people arrested, traffickers, really bad people. And so I'm not sure why that part of the story gets told publicly, but it's out there. So whatever. But when the trafficker that we ended up working with found out, when the other 2 traffickers found out we were working with them, they said, we can't work with you then because that guy runs the town. And so we knew we were working with some really bad dudes. So you got to understand that, like, in that moment, we were like, oh shit, that was the most serious this had ever gotten. And they basically, the way it would work is we had an undercover camera with us. We had to prove that they had these underage girls, or else we couldn't get an op set up. And so we had already talked to these guys and they said they had 25 girls that were underage. And essentially we said, we have to get video footage or else we can't do the op. And so we told these guys, we'll pay you to show us the girls that you're trafficking. And that was the way that essentially it worked, just so we had proof that it was happening. Like, there was already plenty of proof that they did have people they were trafficking. But what people don't understand is when you go undercover, you never see the girls. Like, you only meet them briefly, like in a parking lot or a Walmart or something, or at a restaurant, so that you can tell that they have them. We get a video of it, and then the police will set up the sting. And so we were trying to get proof that they had it. So just meet them. And they say, yeah, come with us. They took us to this strip club that was on the main drag of Cabo, right downtown. And we didn't even go in. We were downstairs in the lobby, and they brought these girls down the stairs that were working at the strip club. And we were kind of already like, oh shit, like, they're probably not underage then, because they're working publicly in the strip club. And long story short, the guy was like, see, look, this is one of them. He told her to lift up her shirt, or he lifted up her shirt or whatever. And then he like motioned to Paul, like, to touch them. Paul did. And I remember thinking at the time, number one, I was like, we were dealing with, again, these were some evil freaking dudes. So number one, I remember thinking, gosh, I'm glad that wasn't me that he pointed out. Number 2, I remember thinking, I'm glad Paul didn't hesitate. And number 3, I remember thinking, I probably wouldn't, I wish that didn't happen. That probably wasn't a good idea that he did that. I think I even mentioned that to Paul later. That being said, it was tricky. Things aren't black and white. Multiple things can be true. And now I'm going to speak to a bigger issue that, like, a lot of people have talked about, whether or not we were causing trafficking to happen or not, or soliciting for trafficking. Because it looks like, based on that article that we were trying to find, because he says Mas Fresca, the whole reason for that is, like, we already knew we were dealing with the traffickers in Cabo. This had been verified from 2 other groups of traffickers. And so we were trying to just get video footage. And so the whole conversation was around, like, were those girls 16? Were they not? And we were kind of hoping so, because that meant we could do an op and rescue whoever came. Now, also on these ops, when the women would get rescued, when the girls would get rescued, typically about a third of them to half of them would actually be underage. The rest would not. And so it wasn't unusual it's like, okay, well, even if, they're not all underage, like it's still helping them out or whatever. And there was some of the ops, I will say, to that point.
I want to pause that really quick because that is kind of an important statistic. A lot of people believe that this is underage children being sex trafficked at a really high volume. And statistically, there's a lot of statistics around which are kind of hard because they vary across the board. But for the majority of what I have heard from like police officers and people who have actually worked in the organizations, they claim that it oftentimes is not underage children, and sometimes it's like 16, 17-year-olds, more of like on the higher age end rather than these really young children, which are oftentimes portrayed by QAnon and even in the Sound of Freedom movie. But he was basically stating that like 1/3 oftentimes were actually underage, and we don't necessarily know what that age is because underage to us might mean 17. But we don't necessarily know, but I think that's an important statistic to remember.
About 3 years ago, I told the girl I was dating at the time that I was done doing undercover ops. And the reason I told her this, and this is the only time I ever shared that until right now, is I said, it doesn't sit right with me completely the way they're doing it. I said 2 things are true here. Number one is we have absolutely rescued some girls that were being trafficked. We found them. We had a recorded conversation from the Mexican federales. This was the only proof I've ever had that these girls were being trafficked. They were begging the guys not to traffic them anymore. But it wasn't like they don't hold them behind cages and things like that. Like they lived at home, but they would basically call them and say, "You're doing this." One of the arrests we did, it was a 8th grade school teacher, and she would use her position to get these girls. She'd just tell them they were coming to a party. They'd go to the party, and next thing they knew, they were being, raped, drugged, told that if they told anybody, they would, kill them, or they'd tell their parents what they did. And so that's how trafficking usually works. It wasn't like these girls were being held against their will 24/7. And so a lot of times when people think of trafficking, it's just not how it's portrayed, even in The Sound of Freedom. I didn't love parts of that movie because I had to tell a bunch of people that asked me about it. I'm like, no, that's not really how it works. It does work that way sometimes, but it's very rare. By the way, these stats, and I'm all over the place. I'm not using notes. I'm just trying to speak from my heart here. I just feel like I should share the information that I have. A lot of the stats that come out about how many kids are being trafficked around the world, they say like 2 million. Then I heard it was 8 million now. I don't believe those numbers, if I'm being honest. I think it's much less. And the reason I believe that is because we went to multiple cities and never found anybody trafficking kids. We went to Mexico City multiple times, went to several places around Latin and South America, and couldn't find trafficking. We just left. We would go down for 3 days, and we were really good at it. The reason why we were good undercover is because we were able to speak, and we're very good at just making friends with people. And that's what it was all about. You'd usually meet somebody, a street hustler who would meet, they would know somebody who knew somebody that was trafficking kids. And half the time we tried, we couldn't find anybody. And I thought that was awesome. And so I don't think the problem is prevalent, as they say. I will say that's my own personal opinion. They can use whatever stats they want, but that's my personal opinion. The other thing I had a problem with, though, the reason why I stopped doing it is because there were times when I felt like, so one of the ops that we did, I'll be honest, it was the one in Cancun. It was the one that Tim led. These guys, these kids, they were like 22, 23. I don't think they had been trafficking. If they had, not much. And I remember, they went out and they found these guys, and it took them about 3 days in Cancun to find anybody trafficking somebody. And they finally found these kids. And part of me was like, well, were these guys really trafficking? Because they were young kids. They were kind of idiots. They were like 20. Again, they're like in their young 20s. And I remember when they showed up to the party and they had these girls. And I remember thinking to myself, like, did these guys just go round up some girls they know or like whatever and said, come to this party, sleep with these Americans, these rich Americans will pay you or something. And it just never sat right with me. And I saw that firsthand. And so when people say maybe they create trafficking, I'm not saying that didn't happen. I do think it was a flawed method. Now, looking back with perspective, at the time, I didn't know anything. I was just the guy going on the ops, and that was the way they were doing it. But as I look back now, It's very conflicting because on one hand, I absolutely think that there was probably a few guys that went out to find girls to bring back because they were trying to get tips from Paul or from Tim or whoever. And they, were trying to prove that they were traffickers. I had to tell one kid in Ecuador, I remember he was like, yeah, we traffic girls or whatever. And I remember looking at the kid, I'm like, this kid doesn't traffic girls. He was like 21 years old. He's like, yeah. And I remember he's like, I'll be back in 2 hours. I'll show you. And he brings this girl back. She was like 16 probably. And he's like, yeah. What do you guys think? And I remember I pull him aside. We're in like the basement of this like warehouse thing. And I'm like, dude, this isn't, who is this? Is this your sister? Is this your girlfriend or what? And he's kind of like, what? And I was like, is this your girlfriend? He's like, yeah. I was like, you don't traffic this girl, do you? And he's like, yeah. I said, dude, get her out of here. You don't know what the fuck you're doing. Get her out of here. You don't traffic this girl. And he's like, okay. And that was my last stop I ever did. I was done after that. I said, I'm not doing this anymore. I was terrible undercover, if I'm being honest. I was good because I spoke Spanish. I could translate. And the truth is, the reason why Paul is the one that got in trouble is because Paul was so good undercover. We didn't have guns. We didn't have backup. The only thing we had was the fact that they never knew why we were actually there. If they had any inkling that we were not undercover, we would have been dead multiple times. And the op in Cabo was the most dangerous one we ever did. By far, these were the most evil dudes we ever took down. That's why I hate that it's out there that it was Cabo where this happened, because it does put some danger on those that were there. That being said, it is what it is. We were dealing with some people in Dominican Republic that got killed while we were doing the undercover work. We went the first weekend, and while we found this guy, he was a bad dude, and he got killed before we even got back there. I mean, this dude was in some bad stuff. And so there's two things can be true at once. And this is the part that I want people to understand is, number one is those ops absolutely needed to stop. I've had, I don't want to call it guilt, but I've had this thing hanging over it where it's like part of that was kind of bullshit. But then there's also the other part where I absolutely know we rescued girls, and I know that we saved their lives. And so both things can be true. I've always been conflicted over that. I've only shared it again with the girl that I was dating a couple of years ago. It's just been one of those things that, how do you talk about that? Because I didn't want the work to stop. I wanted OUR to keep rescuing the ones that needed rescuing, but I also saw the problems with the way they were doing it. And I'm just trying to be very honest here. So those things can both be true. Another thing that where two things can be true at once is I think Tim had good intent to start this. I think any guy that was in the business that he was in that had to look at that stuff that he did, I don't know how you come back from that. I would never in a million years let somebody I love be in that business or whatever. Very grateful that the entire time I was undercover, we never once had to see any pictures of any girls. We never had to see any girls. None of that was a part of it. We only would see the girls when they would bring them to get verification, and then at the party when they showed up where they got rescued. And so I wish I knew the outcome of some of the girls that we rescued. Of all the rescues we ever did, I never got a single update. I tried multiple times to get an update of what happened to them later. And so people have criticized OUR for their aftercare and all these things. I have no idea. I wish OUR was more transparent with that, but I also see that they're like trafficking victims. So how do you talk about that, right? So I don't know what that is. I do have another entire problem with this entire thing. And this is what I want to say about like, there's this thing energetically with the universe that like when you start talking about something more, it's like you're going to notice it more. You're going to be more aware of it. And I think the very act of talking, I've changed my opinion on this. My original opinion was like, we have to make sure everybody knows about trafficking. This is like this evil that nobody's talking about, that nobody knows about. And so it was like, I wanted to help spread the word to everybody. And the more it gets talked about though, the more it becomes real to people. And I think that plants the seed for a lot of people that never would have thought about it to actually participate in it. And the numbers that I've heard that it's only going up, the number of children being trafficked in the last 10 years. So since OUR was founded, it's not doing any better. It's actually doing much worse. I have no verification of these stats, by the way, but I did hear this from a very reliable person. And so I think that there's this level of harm that gets done by almost normalizing it or talking about it all the time, and then, you get the QAnon people that just they think everybody's a pedophile. And that's a whole problem because then it just makes the whole thing look ridiculous, like it's not happening at all. And so I just think that the whole thing is, I kind of wish, I don't know, like part of me thinks that it needs like the very act of Sound of Freedom becoming the #1 movie. It's great for awareness, but how many people now have the seed planted that, oh my gosh, you can actually go get this where they never would have thought about it before. And so that part is tricky. And I think that is being it's just not being counted into the fact of everything that's going on. So as far as what happens next, like I said, with OUR, when I was working with them, me, Andy McCubbins, Sean Reyes, Sean Whalen, Paul Hutchinson, there was a bunch of us that would go together undercover. There was a bunch of other great men, Dave Lopez, all these other great guys. And one by one, they would keep getting eliminated out. And I'm like, why does everyone keep getting kicked out? And every time I was with Tim in a private conversation, I remember just thinking, like, this dude's this job's bigger than him. Like, it just, he doesn't, I think that's what happened. I think he had a good heart about it, but I think the thing was just too big for him. And so I think it overwhelmed him. He didn't trust anybody. If you guys go back to the Vice article from 2 years ago, Vice called me. They wanted my opinion. They tried to make me look stupid. They said that realtors are the ones going undercover. They discounted the amount of intelligence I think that I have in social settings, my ability to make friends with people, my ability to just be able to control situations, get things done. But whatever. I was just a realtor. So for the record, I guess that's true. But the one thing they quoted me correctly on, I was grateful they did, is, they said, why'd you get kicked out of OUR? And I said, well, I wanted to say it in a way, like, essentially what happened is Tim and Paul got in a big fight. It was over a couple things. It started, I'll just tell you guys how it started.
Okay, so I'm just going to stop that there. So, I mean, he brings up a lot of interesting points and interesting perspectives that I can see. And this is something that I've kind of thought about as well, about this whole awareness thing, because like Jimmy Rex in the beginning, I was like, we need to get more awareness out there so that there's more funding to these organizations so they can go out and do what they need to do in order to take down these child traffickers and help victims. And I think both can be true at the same time. More awareness drives more donations to these organizations so that they can help people. But I also think too that having that awareness kind of opens up the doors to this darkness. And that was another interesting perspective that I thought from that thing. But some people have been coming out criticizing Jimmy Rex, that he has tried to just cover his ass. And, that may be true, but we do need more whistleblowers in this world to come out against powerful people. If you look at John Dehlin, who's the host of the Mormon Stories podcast, and listen to some of the videos that he has been doing for years, he's been talking about people personally who have worked with Tim Ballard and have, seen firsthand the fraud, and are just too afraid to speak up. And he's been talking about this for years. So this isn't just recent allegations, but he's also spoken out, and he knew about the Jody Hildebrandt, the 8 passengers. I've talked a lot about this. Ruby Frank, Jody Hildebrandt, who just got arrested for child abuse. That's a very interesting story. But on his podcast, he's been speaking out against Jody Hildebrandt for a long time, even before she's been arrested, and was also speaking to victims, but many of them were just too afraid to come out because of how their position, their powerful position in the Mormon church, as well as in the community. But I'm not criticizing people who are just afraid to speak out. If you are afraid to speak out on something, and that's fine. But we do need more people to come out and be a support system and be a whistleblower, to get this information out there. That needs to be, because I think donors, if they're donating to Operation Underground Railroad, there's some things that they probably should be aware of, do what is right and let the consequences follow. But can you imagine like paying $100,000 for these jumps, like lodging, flights, parties, and never finding anything? Okay. That's just something to note too, as just a donor. Like, if you're putting a lot of money into these operations and they don't even have intel. They're using a psychic to have intel prior to these operations, and they're putting forth a lot of money into doing these ops and then never actually finding anything. I think that is very, that is something that I think should be transparent with donors, is like, how are you doing your operations? It maybe not all of the details of these operations, but with the Gordy situation where he went to go and find Gordy, it was the psychic who led him to that area, and Gordy happened to not actually be there, but they did end up saving a bunch of kids. But that just goes to show you that you can't really rely on a psychic for your intel, and to be going on these jumps and never finding anything and spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, I think is not the best way to use, the donor's money. Okay, so we're also going to be talking about, or this next video, where Tim Ballard and his wife Catherine had gone on the Adam Carolla show. This was just recently, and I guess the episode is Adam Carolla, or Tim Ballard and wife Catherine, plus Jim Lampley. So this is where Tim Ballard actually talks and addresses the photo that has been circulating around, and let's just take a listen and see what it is that he has to say about this alleged photograph, the sexy photograph.
Okay, and that was written contemporaneous to the other testimonies I gave. And they said, look, Tim Ballard's taking credit for rescuing her when she rescued herself. And they knew darn well that I had clarified. They did a whole story just on that. So that was 2020. They've never let up. We got to find something wrong with this guy. And I think it has to do with the fact that I showed up with Trump.
Yeah, well, you said if we built a wall at the Mexican border, then that would help this horrible process that you're involved with. And then they heard wall, and now it's you and Trump, and now the Trump derangement kicks in, and now you must be taken down, even if your motives are to save children.
That's right. And every story, no matter what the allegation, it seems like there's a picture when I was briefing Trump in the White House. So once you have that picture up, then the left or leftist, I'll say anything you want now,
right?
Because he's sitting next to Trump talking.
Again, this is, his defense is that this is a political thing. And I don't think this needs to be politicized at all, but apparently it is being politicized. And this is why people are having a hard time. They're putting blinders on because of, politics. But let's move on.
Talking to him.
Yeah. So the allegations were you showed them a picture of your tattoos and your underwear. You insisted on sleeping in the same bed with them and showering with them and things of that nature. Can you address that?
Yeah, the picture is so funny. I have it. I'm talking to my team, so I'll show it to you. It was taken by the tattoo artist. I'm completely asleep on a couch with my hands and arms propped with pillows. And it takes hours to do this. It's like an actor, like a movie. I have tats all over my body. So I'm in my underwear and I have tats on my leg. I'm asleep. It takes hours. You got to lay there for like a couple hours while it dries. It's a henna tattoo.
Oh, it's a henna tattoo.
Yeah, it's henna tattoos. I'm getting ready for an operation. So the tattoo artist named Katie, she's done a video. We have a post. She took a picture because I have to go back many, many times in that cover role, in that role. So she took a picture while I'm asleep. It wasn't sexy. It wasn't anything. It was just to take a picture. And then she sent it to a couple people and say, hey, keep this archived so that when Tim goes back into this case, I can redesign it exactly the same. We can't be off here. And that's the entirety of the picture. That's it.
So can we see that? So I have a little bit of a question about that too, because allegedly, if he was sending this photograph to other women as kind of like a sexy little photograph, then obviously his intentions to be in his underwear while this woman tattoos his body was done in a sexual manner, like intentionally, because obviously if he's thinking about this being a sexy photograph being sent to his alleged victims, then already he had sexual intentions from the beginning by being in these really short, underwear. And that also brings me to my next point too, is like, if I'm in a like committed relationship and I have a husband and I need to get tattoos on my body, I'm not sure that I would just strip down to my underwear to get them done. There's plenty of like shorts, there's shorts that he could wear. I know it's more acceptable that men have their shirt off. But that just like, it seems odd to me, especially with the placement of where those things were. He could have been wearing shorts rather than just being in these like, kind of, I looked at them as kind of skimpy, but I guess, he's in his underwear. They're very short. They're not boxers or anything like that, but, just something to think about. Okay, so so he's addressed the photograph, and allegedly it was, allegedly it was just like these henna tattoos that he has to get to go on ops. And he addresses the fact that she had to take a picture because he has to continuously go back and he has to be undercover. I just have an issue with the placement of where these tattoos are, because if he has to continuously go back and these tattoos are in a placement where they're covered by clothing normally, like, is he oftentimes have his clothes off when he's going on these ops? You know what I'm saying? Because I just don't see a reason why there's very few tattoos. It's not like he said he's covered in tattoos. There's just very few tattoos. He's got like a heart on his leg and an upper chest tattoo, kind of a small tribal one, and then one above his penis, and then his arms. And I'm wondering, like, what was the point of those placements? Like, why did you need one right above your penis? I don't know. That nobody would see. If he's going on this couples ruse, and so that he doesn't have to partake in some of these sexual acts with the sex workers, then obviously the clothes shouldn't be coming off, right? I just that is just what I'm thinking about. But basically, I mean, that was a really important video because he admits, the person, or sorry, I'm trying to figure out where I'm at here. So hold on 1 second, because we have more video to share. So let's just move on. Okay, let's just do that.
Well, can we see that picture?
Sure.
Well, tell your team to send it to our team, and they'll put it up.
You'll see it.
So this is the kind of nonsense that, again, you just have to, I don't know, it's a new world order. We have to just deal with this on a daily basis. So you would get tattoos as part of the role, part of the character that the kind of guy who would be into this would be the kind of guy who had tattoos. Is that exactly why you did the?
Absolutely.
But you didn't want permanent tattoos.
No, we do. We have a couple of henna tattoo artists, and they get us looking like crazy partiers and tourists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The other was insisting on sleeping in the same bed.
No,
with the woman.
No, I mean the closest that allegation would come from is the story I told you, where we're getting a couple's massage, and we're blocking for each other, so no one's actually getting touched by the sex worker, and we're having credibility. So that would be the closest to that,
But you're on separate beds.
Yeah, you're on
separate tables.
Yeah.
Yeah, but how would it work if you're posing with your wife and you come into town? Do you have to stay at the same hotel? Do you have to stay in the same room? I mean, you never know who's watching, who's talking.
Right.
It makes a certain degree of sense, even that you sleep in the same bed. I mean, it's a little iffy, but what I'm saying is you definitely wouldn't check into the local hotel and then just go, you go to the right, I'll go to the left, because the guy behind the counter may call in and these guys aren't staying in the same room.
So this is all thought out well in advance, and we get hotels that are suites, or where there's multiple people renting a house. And so, because we have to be careful, it's true. They could be watching us. Okay, are they still a couple? They're going into a hotel. Where are they going? So I have logistics guys on the ground that they'll either get hotel rooms that are suites and they're in there already. And, I'm always hanging out with someone else. Like, oh, my buddy's traveling with me too. Right. So, yeah, I mean, we consider ourselves undercover the whole time. And we'll go into what we call the sting house. And usually we do Airbnb because that's easier. And we just go in. And so if they see us go in, and there's 5 bedrooms in there. Right. And the bad guys aren't coming into the house to see that you're not in the same room. So.
Right. And then shower together.
Yeah, that story is a true story that I've told. And I'll tell it again. We rescued 27 kids. It was this one time ever that this happened. We were doing the couples ruse in a spa called the Spa Bon Javo in Dominican Republic. And the intel said that kids were being sold out of that place. So I was actually working with one of our operators. Her name is Marisol Nichols. She's actually an actress and an operator, so she does a very good job. And we were doing the massage thing, but we ordered like a mud thing, because the massage thing leads to having to fight the sexual touching stuff with the sex worker. So we said, let's start with the mud, and I'll get the intel before it's over. Well, I didn't get the intel before it was over, but I was this close. She was about to tell me where they were. So we said, hey, can you order a different thing? Can you order a different service? Well, all we have is massage. I'm like, all right. I had to stay there because I'm this close to getting them to tell me where the kids are. So they say, okay, so they open this door and there's a shower. It's like, shower up. And we're like, oh, are you going to leave the room? And I'm like, no, we got to clean this mess up and prepare for the massage. So we're like, oh crap, well, here we go. I told my wife about it. So we went in there, and you have to think on your feet. So I throw a towel over the window so they can't see. And we're wearing clothes. You're wearing your bathing suit. You don't go naked in these things. And so she goes in, I go in, and we don't even touch each other. And the towel conceals that we're not. Right. And so we've told that story like, that was crazy. That was awkward. You just tell one person, and then it goes boom, boom, boom. Oh, he takes showers. Right. And I know that's where it came from. It's like, I heard he took a shower.
All right, let's stop that there. I think that was actually a really important video, because he does address the shower situation. And I don't know if he got permission from, he names Marisol Nichols, who's actually an actress. You can look on her website. She's very beautiful. She is a human rights advocate, and he basically names her out loud. And it talks about a situation of being in the shower. And I think that, what I think would be interesting to find out later is if Marisol Nichols was actually part of the victim's claims, because if she's not, then obviously he's not addressing the particular shower situations that he is allegedly being told that, that's being sexual misconduct. But also, if he is outing Marisol Nichols, knows that she's actually one of the alleged victims, before these victims actually, these victims actually want to remain private right now. If he's outing her to the public and doxing her, I think is kind of fucked up, to be honest with you. So we'll see how that evolves, but he seems to address a certain shower situation. And and also, I just want to kind of reflect on that too, because he was talking about how they were in their bathing suits when they went into the shower, and you don't go naked when you're going in to get a massage. And I don't know how many massages you guys have got, but you pretty much take your clothes off. I mean, maybe you keep your underwear on, but I know as a female, like they don't give you massages with your shirts on or your bra on because it's really hard to do that. So, um, I don't know how many massages that people have had where they don't even with men, they'll either get down into their boxers or they'll just go naked. I've had couple massages and that has happened. So, that's just kind of interesting to me that he said that the clothes were on, but he also keeps talking about how many children that the couple's ruse has saved, but one of the problems is that there is no evidence. There's like no evidence of these kids, you know, uh, being rescued. And that's kind of been an ongoing issue because there's reports from previous people who have specifically resigned from Operation Underground Railroad because they kept asking for evidence of the children that were being saved. But again, they weren't getting it. Um, and I get because it's probably to protect the identities of the victims. But if you think about this in the opposite way, that's a really good cover. If you are somebody who wants to groom people and participate in certain ungodly acts, uh, it's a good guise to commit these types of acts in the name of rescuing children. um you know it, if you can't share their identities and there's no paper trail and things like that. So that's just another way to think about it. But we are going to now share a video from one of Tim Ballard's closest friends and allies, Eric Moutsos. And I know that there's some things lingering around out there about him. I mean, how often can we not find bad things about people? Nobody's a saint. So obviously, if somebody's going to come out, they're going to be open to criticism. So sometimes I take those with a grain of salt, unless they have some validity to them. Obviously, I'm here doing a video on Tim Ballard and the allegations, but that's where I'm trying to find validity to these allegations. I'm trying to explore this so that I can figure out what my own beliefs are about this situation. So the reason why I think this is a really important video, because Eric Moutsos he was an undercover police officer or he's a retired one, and he was a close friend of Tim Ballard. He's gone on these operations with him, and he spoke out in support of Tim Ballard in the beginning of these allegations, and then began to change his tone. So let's hear what he has to say now.
I had another difficult conversation with 3 more victims of Tim Ballard's manipulation and sexual predatory behavior. A few other influential witnesses were there on the call. We heard these heart-wrenching stories and more of Tim Ballard's blueprint grooming tactics. I guess I'll call them systematic grooming tactics. And so I'll go over these. Hire caring, attractive women who have great desire to help children. Inflate a sense of importance by convincing these women, most often mothers and wives, that they will be a big part of saving children by being an undercover operative. Once sense of purpose is inflated, training sessions began. While there is some legitimate undercover training being done in these cases that I've spoken with, training would also consist of creating sexual chemistry. Intimacy was needed with Tim. So to create a sexual chemistry and intimacy was needed for Tim.
So he's talking about how he's groomed these women is that he's explained to these women that this is needed in order to create that sexual intimacy between them, in order to be more believable on these operations. And that's kind of the grooming allegations, I guess.
This level of intimacy varied from kissing and petting, naked showers, to oral sex, and possibly more. So from what I understand,
and those allegations haven't come out yet. They're specifically speaking on what they have gotten from the victims, because this stuff is not actually, being reported by the attorney or any of that kind of stuff at this point. So apparently these are more allegations, more details that are going to be coming out as things go on.
Tim Ballard was the only member of the OUR to participate in these types of training sessions. So it's possible that some of the other trainers, they'd go on these this couple ruse thing. And sometimes I guess some of them would hold hands. We also understand, let me see if let me go back here. We also understand that his dismissal resignation from OUR was due to internal complaints due to his sexual behavior. So this is really important, okay? This is really important. Because a lot of people are saying, why is this coming out now? It's really suspect now, which I understand. But when all this stuff pieces together, you're going to understand why this is a big deal, okay? The women were manipulated to participate in these trainings under the guise that they were helping to save children, that this activity had the blessing of Elder Ballard, that the medium and psychic Janet Russo gave readings and inspiration that was the divine will.
So he's basically stating that even the psychic is a part of this spiritual manipulation by saying, this is the divine will, and using that as a tactic to get these women on board with these sexual acts with Tim Ballard.
Questions were asked from Tim to these women. What are you willing to do to save children? Sorry to get emotional about this kind of stuff, you guys. Like, this is deep stuff. Demand complete confidentiality from the victims, right? So this process was like, you have victims erase all digital correspondence with which was meant to be part of the couple's ruse in the supported case, that a sex trafficker grabbed their phone and wanted to see salacious material. They would see correspondence from said victim and Ballard. Possibly Ballard would maintain the correspondence and cherry pick text to make it look like he could blackmail them if they said anything about.
Okay, that's actually a really interesting thing that he brings up there, is that it was apparently Tim Ballard had made them delete evidence that was a part of this couple's ruse, so that if a sex trafficker took the phone and looked through it, that they wouldn't get, they wouldn't see that this was an operation. And I find that to be kind of interesting, that he would be cherry picking what could be said and what couldn't be said, and getting these women to delete evidence by saying that, well, if a trafficker gets a hold of your phone, we need you to delete this stuff, and then using it as blackmail against them. That was something that just kind of stood out to me.
The ruse. Particular operations did not yield the amount of sex trafficked children he is claiming. So this is all notes, okay? Many of the other operatives were much more successful than Tim, not using the couple's ruse. Multiple marriages have been broken up. Tim is attached to this psychic medium, Janet Rousseau. I think that's how you say her last name. So questions that I'm getting, because it's hard for me to read some of these comments, right? But I get some of these questions. So I wanted to address a lot of these questions, all right? Because when I first heard this, I'm just going to try to talk openly about this, okay? When I first saw this with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and the response, and to be honest, I'm just going to be honest, I was upset. This is, I didn't understand. It didn't make any sense. I thought it was political, right? And so it was very frustrating to me, because it's like, this looks like somebody like within our church is, a political hit job. I'm just giving you my honest feel about this stuff. That's what I was thinking. So then I'm now kind of defending him, right? I got a couple messages from his guys like, hey, here's the presser. So I'm sending this stuff out, defending him, right? I did a live video about it. I took it down. I don't remember exactly what I said, but I'm trying to piece all this stuff together. And then I got a message from somebody. I don't want to go too far into detail, but I talked to this first person, and this person said, I'm one of them. I'm one of them. And I know this isn't going to make sense for a lot of you guys. It's not going to make sense, but all I can say is that when you know, you know. And this has anything to do with my police background and my interviews. It has nothing to do with that. It's like, when you know, you know. And I knew right then, but I wanted to get details. So I asked a lot of questions. I made my, and I got a lot more details, because, when I did my first couple posts, it was vague, right? There was a lot of like people like, hey, there's got to be more than this. You just heard one person, now you're coming out. This is a total hit job. And it was like, you guys, this is not a Kavanaugh moment. Like these are people, these are operatives. Does that make sense? These women were operatives. These aren't just like these random tips. And so then I heard more testimony the next day, and more testimony, and so now I have an opinion. Now a lot of people are saying, like, they're saying things like, how dare you do this? Like, how dare you come out? Like, you can't be doing, you're not the judge, you're not the jury. Have you guys seen those comments? You're not the judge, you're not the jury. So why are you the executioner? You should be doing this. And it's like, you guys don't understand what he's doing. I believe he knew this was coming. He knew this was coming. This is the exact reason why he did this whole Senate stuff, because he knew this stuff was going down.
Okay, that's an interesting point to point out about this whole Senate thing. So he's basically claiming that he knew all this was going to happen because there has been this ongoing internal investigation with Operation Underground Railroad. He got dismissed from Operation Underground Railroad because of all the sexual harassment allegations against him. And that, all the, like, after this whole thing was going to start coming out, this was going to go public. And, he's basically stating that he's running for senator because that was going to be his defense on getting out of these allegations, is that this is a political move. And so, that's an interesting perspective there.
And so now, I mean, it's freaking brilliant. And so, and I do have a message for Tim at the very end. Because, and for people that want to now, I have a message at the very end. So what I'm trying to say is that he's trying to play it both ways. So everyone's like, you can't do this in the court of public opinion. He's the one that's doing it in the court of public opinion. He's the one that's doing it. He's the one that's using everybody around the world right now. Literally, that movie is going around the world. I think it's like #1 right now in like Brazil or something. So he's doing this in the court of public opinion and knows dang well that there's a lot of moving parts that these stories can't be told right now, or at least aren't going to be told right now. And so this isn't about people are like, oh, you can't judge. I am not judging this man to heaven or hell. I am not the final judge. We are all sinners. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you're on the left. It doesn't matter if you're on the right. It doesn't matter who you are. We are all sinners. And that's what I was trying to convey to Tim at the very beginning. If you missed what I said at the very beginning, my very first post.
All right, we're just gonna stop there. So he makes some really interesting points. You know, I think with his story, the interesting part is that he just came out after hearing testimony from these victims. So he was actually in support of Tim Ballard before that time and thought it was a political move. And then after hearing some of the allegations and reports from the victims, he's kind of changed his opinion about the situation, which I find to be a little interesting, as well as just his perspective on why this is a political move now, that he is running for Senate because he knew these allegations were going to be coming out and he wanted to kind of be ahead of the game. And so, I mean, those are some interesting ways to kind of think about that kind of stuff because, you know, if that's the case, then, you know what I'm saying? I don't know. That's kind of weird. And then, you know, let's also talk about just real quick about the excommunication from the Mormon Church. There was, you know, Tim Ballard did have a disciplinary council on Mondays. Well, it's been alleged that Tim Ballard had a disciplinary council on Monday, September 25th, and that there was a letter that was delivered of his excommunication on September 27th at 9:45 p.m. So there's a lot of this evidence that potentially is coming out that he was excommunicated, but we don't have a clear understanding of that yet. So we'll just see, even though he's out there saying he's in good standing with the Mormon Church, we will just see how that goes. Because if that's the case, then he was lying to the public if he actually has been excommunicated from the Mormon Church, which is kind of a big deal. And then also too, I think it was October 10th or October 4th that Tim Ballard was officially going to come forth and say that he was running for Senate. And there was some reports that Jesus was the one who told him to announce his Senate race on those days. So we'll be keeping an eye out on that. I know he has talked about that, but I'm going to share one last video. And this is it's a TikTok video from Fox 13 News of what happened when Tim was asked about all these internal investigations that about Operation Underground Railroad. So let's just see what this is, and then we will wrap up this episode.
A portion of that investigation has concluded, but nobody really feels closure because there is so much uncertainty surrounding what the focus of that investigation really was. And even though the article from Vice gives us a small snapshot talking about Tim Ballard receiving psychic readings, communicating with the prophet Nephi, and apparently a soured relationship with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, this all really started with questions about money. In 2020, prosecutor Troy Rawlings posted a series of messages on his personal Instagram account. Quote, "Please beware of any individual entity or organization who solicits your money and may be claiming credit for work to protect children that is actually done by our task force." The messages did not name OUR directly.
Has OUR ever over-exaggerated what it's accomplished?
No. No, I mean, it's funny when we give our numbers, we're actually pretty conservative.
Is OUR still under investigation?
I focus on rescuing kids, and I have a team that would answer those questions. Yeah, unbelievable. I'm out of here. You guys started a little easy.
Within minutes after that question, he got angry and walked out of the interview. For years, his team told people there was no criminal investigation, which is not true. The nonprofit's chief legal officer says she has no explanation.
What was the basis of the investigation?
You'd have to ask the Davis County Attorney's Office.
Are you able to explain why OUR was telling people that there was not an investigation when in fact there was?
I don't have any information on that.
Do you feel that this is now fully behind you?
I certainly hope so. I mean, we have to take the Davis County Attorney at his word.
Usually, completed investigations are a matter of public record, but when we asked for a copy, prosecutors would not give up the case file. We also found Operation Underground Railroad wrote a letter asking for those records to remain private, in part because of federal grand jury material. We believe at least some of these records should be public. We're in the process of filing appeals so that you know what this case is really about, especially now that a member of the Quorum of the 12 is citing betrayal.
Okay, so I think that some of the fraud allegations against Operation Underground Railroad was that Tim Ballard had actually started a couple of other nonprofits and for-profit organizations, and allegedly he was laundering money between these nonprofits and profits, and which is fraud and it's illegal. And I think that was one portion of it. And then obviously you have the sexual harassment, sexual misconduct allegations as well. But obviously they don't know the details of what those investigations are and what came about it. But obviously we're at a point now where these victims are coming forth, and they kind of talked about how this internal investigation had occurred, and it opened up doors for them to come forth and file charges against Tim Ballard. So we don't really know. And as you can see, this is some of the concerns that I have, because when you listen to Tim Ballard and, some of the operatives and those kinds of things, they don't necessarily address those questions that we have. A lot of it gets chalked off as some political stunt because he's running for Senate, and that he's been seen with Donald Trump, and that he is a Republican, and is making this like a political situation. And so those are some of the questions that I have in particular that I would like to be addressed, because some of those things just don't make sense to me, and maybe you have a different perspective and you see things differently, and that's totally fine. I would love your guys' input. You can always reach out to me with any new information that you have. If you have any new videos or any of that kind of stuff that you would like me to check out or even talk about on my podcast or any future videos, send them my way. We can talk about it. But those are just some of the concerns that I have surrounding this whole thing. And I could go way deeper into some of the things that surround around Operation Underground Railroad, but I'm not going to do that because I'm not on a campaign to take this guy down. Obviously, he's done good work. He's saved children. And he has, even the people who have talked about it, talked and worked with him personally, have said that they thought he had good intentions going into it. And, maybe this was just bigger than him, and he couldn't, he couldn't, keep up with it, and bad things occurred, whatever it was. And maybe he didn't have the training to know that, some of the ways that he was doing it was maybe unethical. Um, but also these allegations are a major concern. They're not just reasonable human faults. Okay. Sexual misconduct, grooming, and spiritual manipulation, and using all of those tactics are wrong. They're unethical. And I think we should take that into consideration as we actually review the evidence and see what is true and what is not true. I think as this evolves, we're going to get a lot more of the story, and I think it's just really going to be up to the person who's receiving that information if they're going to believe it or not. Because like I said, everybody has now placed corruption on all aspects and systems of society. And so maybe even if it comes out that it's been proven to be true, some people are just going to look the other way and still support him as a person. And, that's up to you. If you want to do that, then you can do that. But I want to look at this from a perspective of, like, thinking about it as a whole. There's a lot of questions that I have that just don't make sense to me, that I would like to be addressed. So let me know your opinion. And also to there was also some other things that I just found to be kind of odd, when Tim Ballard is getting private planes, and he's renting helicopters, and he's flying these helicopters into events, and coming down as if he is like some Navy SEAL hopping off of a helicopter to come save children. And it almost is like this god, like God presence, like he's looking at himself as like a god. And Mormons think that they are going to become gods after they die of, so it's his god complex mentality. Sometimes that happens when somebody gains a lot of power and notoriety in a very short period of time, and it's in the public eye. It gets to them, they like it, and they want more of it. And so that just, some of those acts, I'm just like, well, where is all that money going towards? I mean, if I had money, if I really wanted to save children and help children, and I was receiving millions and millions of dollars to do that, would I think that it was a good resources to use private planes, to rent helicopters for these events? Like, maybe it makes for a more powerful experience that gets people to want to spend more money or whatever it is. But don't you think that money could benefit other organizations that are actually helping the trafficked victim, or expanding how you're doing your operations, not just going overseas and creating these ops, but maybe like setting up a different aspect of your organization of like setting these kids up for a successful life? Homes, like shelter, education. I don't know if that's how those funds were ever being used, because a lot of people allegedly say that there's no track of what happens to these children after they're saved. So we don't really know what happens. And that, I would prefer to see him using his money more wisely, rather than to make a major movie. I don't know if those are the funds that he used to make that movie, but, or, he obviously had a lot of investors. He had a lot of people invested to make this movie. But I just wanted to, like, if it's true that a lot of the aspects of The Sound of Freedom are not as they're actually portrayed in real life, then what was the point of over sensationalizing the movie? If the movie is about you and you want to portray this like savior who comes in and rescues children, and that this is a worldwide issue, why not make the movie real? Like, why not make it like a real, like as close to reality as possible, rather than making it like over dramatized, I guess you could say. So those are just things that have stood out to me. Let me know what you guys thought. I'm going to wrap this up. This was a long video. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you know more about this, send it my way. You can follow me on Instagram. You can find all the links in the show notes, all of the things. So for now, I will leave you guys to the rest of your day. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you come back. Please don't call me a pedophile after listening to this, because you're retarded. You're absolutely retarded if you do that. All right. See you later, everyone. Stay weird, my friends, and don't forget to question everything. Bye-bye.